the god of the dead, the firstborn son of Cronus, the king of the underworld, Hades. Many will be familiar with this name due to its high popularity in the big screens of movies and TV shows. But one thing that most movies gets wrong is the portrayal of evil characterization of this so-called dark and gritty deity, Hades. If you like this content, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Hades was the firstborn son of the titans Cronus and Rhea, and thus was the brother to Zeus and Poseidon. When the gods came to power after defeating the titans, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades divided their rule of the cosmos, where Zeus ruled the heavens, Poseidon ruled the seas, and Hades became the fearsome king of the underworld. The underworld, also called Hades after the name of its ruler, is located deep within the earth and was the domain of several gods of death and destruction, like Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, Morpheus, god of dreams, the Erinyes, goddess of vengeance and destruction, and more. And of all the deadly and destructive deities of the underworld, Hades was the king of them all. This means he had complete dominion over the land of the dead, the rule of the afterlife, as he reigned supreme over all the gods of death, darkness, and destruction. He had a three-headed hellish hound named Cerberus that guarded the entrance to the underworld, who had the duty to restrict the dead from escaping the land of Hades and forbidding the living to enter it. The weapon of Hades is often portrayed as the bident, the two-headed sphere, similar to the Poseidon's trident. But the original Greek sources never mentions the clear story of how Hades came to possess the bident. This implementation of the bident with Hades was associated by artists during the 16th and the 17th century that portrays figures associated with underworld as demon or Satan-like. But the real weapon of Hades was the Helm of invisibility that was forged by the Cyclopses, along with the thunderbolts of Zeus and the trident of Poseidon. The name Hades meant the unseen one, which might be implemented due to his Helm of invisibility or his association with death and darkness. And much to our surprise, even though Hades is one of the three most powerful deities in the whole of Greek pantheon, he is not included in the category of Olympians. This is because even though he is regarded among the top tier gods in the pantheon, he spends no time in Mount Olympus among the gods and prefers to stay in his own kingdom, the underworld. The character of Hades is quite gritty, filled with dark aura. His isolation from the Olympian gods had given him an infamous reputation of being grim, terrifying, and dark. Although Hades was respected among the highest of all gods, that doesn't mean that the Greeks didn't fear him, as the truth is they were terrified of this fearsome and dark god of death. So much so that they didn't even say the name Hades, but rather referred to him as Pluton. The name Pluton means the rich one or the wealthy one, as the underworld is his domain and all of the precious minerals and metals are in his possession, making him the richest of all gods. There were very few temples dedicated to his name, and his worship was practiced by small groups, as the larger population preferred to avoid this dark ruler. He commands all that is terrifying and related to death and destruction, almost as he is the very personification of evil and doom. Right? Well, wrong. Most of you who came to know about Hades from pop culture and modern movies will be familiar with this character as an evil and unjust deity, ruining the lives of mortals. Well, the reality cannot be further from truth. Yes, Hades is the god of the underworld and is associated with death and darkness, but we need to look deeper into the narrative of different cultures. Whenever we see a figure who is the ruler of the underworld and is associated with death and darkness, we often imagine a satanic character as the dark prince of hell, torturing damned souls for eternity. Movies often portrays these two gods, Zeus and Hades, as polar opposite, as Zeus plays the good guy and Hades often ends up being the villain. The concept of a good sky father and a bad underworld ruler comes from our modern understanding of Christianity, of God and Satan. But for the Greeks this was not the case at all, as death is simply an inevitable part of our lives and Hades is simply in control of death and afterlife. Yes, death is terrifying, and perhaps that's the reason people avoided the worship of Hades that might lead to attracting his attention. But diving into the original character of Hades, one thing is clear, that he is one of the most benevolent gods in the entire pantheon. Contrary to the popular belief of beings in the heaven as good and deities in hell as bad, the Greek pantheon teaches us some of the most unique characteristics and understanding of the gods. While Zeus is featured as a loving father figure, an all-just ruler, and, to my surprise, a loyal husband and a family man, which is highly inaccurate from the mythos. In reality, we all know about the womanizing habits of the king of the gods, even though he is married to Hera. The gods of Olympus, especially Zeus, Poseidon, and Apollo, had a particular habit of finding their way with other goddesses and mortal women. Sometimes these affairs resulted in the births of heroic demigods, but most times the women often end up suffering due to their divine shenanigans. The number of mortals suffering, unfortunately, due to the intervention of Zeus and Poseidon can go on forever, like the time Zeus made Io transformed into a cow just to hide it from Hera, or the much famous incident of Poseidon assaulting Medusa. These affairs were carried out even though both of the gods were married. Calling the relationship of Zeus and Hera a failed marriage will be an understatement, while the marriage of Hephaestus and Aphrodite didn't work out well as she had an affair with the god Ares. Hades, on the other hand, is married to Persephone, goddess of spring and queen of the underworld, and they, ironically, had the most functional relationship of all the gods. But even Persephone wasn't a captive to Hades and was allowed to leave the underworld for Mount Olympus 2/3 of the year and return to Hades to spend the rest of the time with him. As most gods were known for severely making the lives of mortal men and women more miserable, Hades, on the other hand, doesn't participate in such activities. There are plenty of stories where Hera, Aphrodite, Zeus, and the other gods cause trouble for the mortals, but such cannot be said for Hades. In fact, Hades aided those who seek help, like the time he helped Orpheus reunite with his wife, or lent his Helm of invisibility to Hermes to fight against the giants. And even the Trojan War, where all the gods were engaging themselves in the entertainment of the mass casualties of war, Hades had no interest in such activities and didn't participate in the affairs of mortals. Our understanding of death and darkness had always been associated with demons and monsters, and that is the result of screenwriters choosing Hades as the villain of movies. This is an effort to apply the modern concept of good and evil to ancient Greek culture, showing the story of Zeus against Hades that never existed in ancient Greece. The antagonizing characterization is something Hades never had in the ancient story, as he was simply the mighty lord of Underworld, isolating himself from the other gods and doing his job the best.